My dad is one of 5 siblings, and his parents, they love the warmer weather, so they were down in Florida, like, right after Christmas, they left, and so at that point, nobody knew about this over here. Um, it was sometime in March, and my dad and his siblings were all talking and saying, their mom and dad are down in Florida, they're alone, and this was also shortly after that video circulated of those people on spring break and the guy saying, if I get corona, I get corona. And I think, that for me, I think is when it hit my dad that this was really like his parents were in danger. Maybe it was another time, but I know like he would always have the best interests out for them. But he started talking with he has 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and they were all talking, and my one uncle said, we need to go down and get them. They can't fly, they're really old, my grandpa has suffered a stroke a few years ago, so he's already kind of on a weakened point, and my grandma has a lot of health issues. So they decided, they rented an RV. They cleaned everything prior to, the company cleaned it, but they still wiped everything down. They didn't buy any food while they were on the road. My dad and my mom, my sister packed all sorts of stuff for them, so they were only eating food that they brought and made. When they stopped anywhere, they wiped down the gas pumps, and they wore gloves, they wore masks. As soon as they got in contact with my grandparents, they had them put masks on. They wiped down everything my grandparents put in the car. I mean, like, at some point I realized I sound like they might have been neurotic, but it's like they did not want to risk anything. When my grandparents came to the house to get their car, they stayed 6 feet apart from us. We all put on masks just because we're like, even though we know we don't have anything, we know they probably don't have anything, we're not going to run that risk. So we waited 2 weeks when they came back to see if anything, any chance of the disease happening showed up, and nothing did. So it was a little scary because I didn't want my dad to leave. I didn't want him to risk getting sick. I was really scared about it for like 2 days. I just kind of just waited, and I'm like, I swear to God, if my dad gets sick, I'm going to be so mad, because I didn't want him to drive. I didn't want him to leave during this. And I remember just saying to him, like, I don't want you to go. I don't want anything to happen. He was like, don't worry, I'll wipe everything down, we'll wear masks. And I'm like, yeah, but what if you get sick? Because like, that's all we need right now is you getting sick. And then if mom gets sick because she's got asthma, whatever, I don't want it. And he's like, you know what? We're going to be totally fine. And my dad is a big believer in God. And he just says, when God wants to take me, he will. And that's supposed to make me feel better. And it doesn't. But I just was like, I don't want to worry about that. And, we talked a little bit before he left. And then he left and he came back. And they were all fine. My grandparents are settled into their condo here, and they're okay. And I think they were disappointed to leave Florida. I feel like my dad and my uncle probably talked a little bit of sense into them and were like, hey, it's not just warmer weather you're leaving all these people who don't seem to think it's a big deal, so they're going to the beach and possibly infecting you, and changed their tune really quick. I was really worried that something was going to happen to him because and again, I wasn't in Florida with my grandparents, so I'm not really sure how long it took for them to realize they should stay home. But I was just like, I was thinking about all these people who are on spring break, and like those super arrogant spring breakers who are like, this is ruining my vacation, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I swear to God, if some idiot came into contact with them and they were still going out, and then they got into contact with my dad, and my dad suffers for this and he's in the hospital or something, I won't forgive anybody who did this, because it's so horrible. And I realized I probably was saying that out of anger and irrationality, but I was just like, so I think that's when I started to get more mad about people who weren't following through, because I'm like, come on, you have to like at least care about someone in your life to the point where you don't want them to get sick. And for me, it's the people I'm living with, and my grandparents weren't here. But I just remember being so worried. I'm like, if dad doesn't come home, what are we going to do? If dad doesn't, if he gets stuck, or if, something like that, if he runs into contact with someone who's sick and he doesn't know it. And I just kept telling myself, like, you can't worry about that until it happens, until you see a sign, like until he has a fever that doesn't go away, until he starts coughing, until he just says, like, I don't feel good, I need to go to the hospital. And it just, kind of took a little bit of the weight off of me. And when he came home, I felt a lot better, because it was just like, when he reiterated to me, we didn't go anywhere to eat. We had all this food in the car. We wiped everything down. We must have blown through like 3 packs of wipes in one trip. Like, it's just little things like that make you feel a little bit better. But it was hard, because it's like months ago. If he told me I'm driving down to Florida to get Grammy and Papa, I would have been like, cool, have fun. Like, now it's just like little things like that you have such heightened fear and awareness to, and you have to take it with a dose of rationality. Like, even going to the store, am I going to pick up something? You got to be like, okay, take the precautions first and then worry about it later if you start to exhibit the signs. I asked him for the first couple of days, I'm like, how are you feeling? How's your breathing? How's everything? And he's like, I'm fine. Don't worry. It's okay. And I waited the 2 weeks, and nothing changed about him. I mean, he never came down with any of the symptoms. He never had like a minute where he was like, oh, I have a fever or chest or anything like that. I think it was the best thing that my dad and my uncle went, because they both have been adhering to all the restrictions and all the, safety measures to an absolute T. So I think it was just really good that they went, because they were going to set my grandparents straight and be like, you can't get in the car until you wear a mask. You need to wash your hands everywhere you go. You're not getting out of the car until we get back to Illinois. Like, just those kinds of things.